Hello, all. Excuse me, it's right at the top of the hour. So we'll give folks a minute to join us, but thank you for joining. My name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of the IIIF Consortium. I'm really excited to welcome you to this last but not least session of the IIIF online meeting. So we'll be talking in just a few minutes about some of the strategic framework development that the executive committee of the IIIF Consortium has been developing. It's not fully baked though, because an important piece of everything that IIIF does, but particularly this kind of effort, is feedback from the community and working with the community to make sure that that we're getting the right input and that we're exploring the right things and placing the right emphasis. So we'll go through all of those things in just a minute. Before I get started, I just want to say a big thank you to folks who have joined us for all or part sections of the online meeting over the last 3 days. We are recording everything, and we will get those recordings up and online as quickly as we're able. And so we'll send an email to the registered attendees with the links to those recordings as soon as possible, as well as some post-event, a quick, short post-event survey so we can get some feedback for future iterations of this, and some links to things, to resources like the IIIF newsletter that you might want to take advantage of if you're not already getting the IIIF newsletters. So to start, I and a few of the other folks who are part of the IIIF Executive Committee will be going through some of the materials that we've been talking about. But actually, maybe I can ask if there are the members of the IIIF Executive Committee who are able to join us here today, maybe they could introduce themselves in the chat. Not all of them will be speaking during these slides, but there are a number of them here today, and we'll be getting to some discussion and even some breakout rooms later in the session. So maybe the Executive Committee folks, if they're around, could introduce themselves in the chat in the meantime. And so I'm going to start this off by just doing a little bit of background, and then I'm actually going to hand it off to the first person who's identified themselves in the chat there, Tom Kramer from Stanford University, who is also the chair of the IIIF Executive Committee. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed after David. Thank you, David and Tom. So, and others can file in as we go through the chat. So thank you all. So this is the strategic planning framework that we've been developing over the course of the last few months. This really started in earnest just in advance of our annual meeting in June in Cambridge, in Boston, where we had the first IIIF in-person meeting that we were able to have in a number of years for obvious reasons. And we were able to get together with members of the executive committee to start thinking through next strategic steps. So going back a little bit, setting the context here for kind of how we arrived at this point and kind of what we've been doing, what the framework has been thus far. I want to give you a little bit of background into the IIIF Consortium. So IIIF, many of you have been working with IIIF for a long time or have been familiar with it, have been hearing about it. IIIF has been around in some form or another for about 11 or 12 years. It started as basically a shared idea for some technology for presenting collection materials. That really came together in something called the Shared Canvas, which was published in different ways in 2011, 2012. And that proved very valuable. That proved to be an extremely powerful way of working with collections materials and working with materials across institutional boundaries. And so you've heard this explanation of IIIF many times, I'm sure. But it was such an important piece of technology, and the open specifications were so critical to the way that these institutions in those early days wanted to work with work with each other and with their own internal collections, that a few years after the development of that initial technology, there was this governance aspect that was brought together. So the IIIF Consortium was formally founded some years after the beginnings of the earliest IIIF technologies. So the consortium was formed in 2015, formally. There's a memorandum of understanding that brings together the interests and alignment. And it was initially founded by these 11 institutions. And soon expanded to 13 institutions that formed the very first executive committee, the very first governance structure of the IIIF ecosystem. And along with that came staff roles. That is actually the beginning of my position and the 3 IIIF Consortium staff members. So there's myself, Glenn Robson, and Caitlin Perry, who are employed by the IIIF Consortium to do the community support and strategic support of different efforts like the ones we'll talk about here today. I'm very excited. It's grown by leaps and bounds since that initial development in 2015. So from those 11 institutions at that first gathering of minds, now to a membership model of 63 members who financially support the work of the consortium staff and the initiatives that we do, like this online meeting, the in-person meeting that we do in the springtime, funding things like the travel scholarships and the fellowship tickets that we're able to offer so that we can provide free training opportunities for institutions around the world. So we're now up to 63 members, hopefully adding a number of new members in the coming year. And please do get in touch with us if you've seen the value of IIIF and you want to become a part of that sustaining membership body. With that, the governance mechanism, the overarching governance mechanism is these 13 institutions that are voted on by the IIIF Consortium membership to represent the interests of that group. And those represent the IIIF Executive Committee. And so, well, first, before I get to the Executive Committee, you can see here, this is a map I love showing. So this shows since that founding idea, since a handful of institutions got together a little bit more than a decade ago, we've grown to hundreds of institutions around the world. So the red dots there are the places that we know about that use IIIF, but the blue dots here are really a fundamental piece of the consortium sustainability model. So the blue dots are those 63 members of the consortium. You can see them distributed all around the world, and yeah, supporting the work that we do. And so this is the list here of the consortium, the current 2022 executive committee. So you can see this year we are represented by the BNF in France, the British Library, Cornell University, the Europeana Foundation, the Göttingen State and University Library, Harvard University, as well as the Getty Trust, Kyoto University Library Network, Leiden University Libraries, the National Gallery of Art, Stanford University, the Wellcome Trust, and Yale University. I should say this is the 2022 representation. We do have elections each year, so we have a rolling model so that each year a handful of institutions, this year it's 3 institutions, have terms that are completing. And so we are doing elections that should conclude in the next few weeks to seat new members from our membership body to take over those seats. So for the 2023 Executive Committee, there'll be 3 new members or potential new members added to this list. And so that is some of the overall context. So as I mentioned earlier, the consortium was founded in 2015, and there was an initial set of strategic tasks and strategic elements that was called the Next Steps document that really governed the work that we did from those early days through about 2021. And in fact, I'll add that one of the parts of the Next Steps document about getting the consortium to the current phase that it inhabits was developing and building out the staff model. So my position as managing director of the IIIF Consortium was one of those next step strategic elements. So we're now at a new phase. We basically accomplished a huge amount of what we wanted to do out of those Next Steps documents. As you can see if you've joined us for the last 3 days, there's just an extraordinary amount of energy and vibrancy within the IIIF community. Our goal here is basically to figure out what are the highest priority and highest return actions that we can take, and what can we do to make the best use of staff time and community-led efforts over the coming years. And so to go into some of that and how we developed it, I'm going to hand it over here to Tom Kramer. Oops, sorry.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Josh. That was a fantastic welcome and great orientation on the history of IIIF, as well as the important role of the IIIF Consortium and how it is an organized framework and a governance framework to make sure that the community can advance for the benefit of everyone. As the initial next steps document, I think we can say has largely been completed. Not only did we achieve the time, but we are, as you've seen over the last couple of days, a really thriving and robust organic community. As we were talking about the new executive committee, which stepped in after elections last year, and a new operating committee, which is the 6 officers who help guide and coordinate a lot of the administrative work, we really decided and realized that it is time to pick the next set of hills to do. IIIF can continue and it is robust, stable, and thriving in its current form, and that organic development will always be an essential part of IIIF. But we also think it is time, and there's both opportunity and need to be a little bit more directive and a little bit more strategic about some of the things that we would like to accomplish. The nature of IIIF is really a distributed one. We are very lucky to have a small but excellent staff with Josh and Glenn and Caitlin. But the real strength of the community and the engine that drives it is all of the member institutions and individual contributors who are showing up at sessions like this. So what we are looking for the next 3 to 5 years is, as Neil Fitzgerald from the British Library coined it, we need a new next steps document. And that's what we're laying out the bones of today. There will be an interactive session at the end of this. So as we go through, when you see gaps or you say, oh, this is something that would be great to do to add on to that, please write that down on a piece of paper or on a sticky and inject that when we get to the interactive part. Josh, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. As Josh mentioned, right before the conference in Cambridge, Massachusetts, this year, we had 2 extensive brainstorming sessions, one with the operating committee, which is a subset of the executive committee, and then actually a 2-step process with the executive committee, really trying to identify what are the major themes and areas for that are important to IIIF and to advancing it. And you can see there was lots of overlap in the themes: community development, technical development, increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is what DEI stands for, if you're not familiar with that. The staffing model, partnerships, membership model, and of course, financials. And then the larger executive committee came up with almost the same list, though really a differentiation between the technical community and the community of scholars, researchers, and end users for IIIF objects. Next slide, please. One of the things that we wanted to do as we were coming up with a new structure for a strategic framework for IIIF is address some of these key considerations. Given the nature of IIIF, a very small core staff and a very low distributed use spreading from multiple continents with really lots of different sector experts and different types of sectors represented, we wanted to figure out what's the best number of initiatives. We wanted to have not just 1 or 2, because that would be too few for an initiative in a community of this size. But we also didn't want to have too many where we spread ourselves too thinly and failed to make progress in key areas. We really wanted to figure out what those key areas were. So which were ones that would really move the needle and make a tremendous difference over a 5 or a 10-year run, things that are keystone activities, where if we did that, we'd also be doing lots of other things well, by definition. A big consideration is how do we resource the initiatives, because as excellent as Josh, Glenn, and Caitlin are, they cannot do everything by themselves, nor do we want to. This is really something where a lot of initiative, creativity, and the expertise is in the people who are on these phone calls. And we need broad leadership. So the leadership needs to come not only from the executive committee and the institutions represented there, but from experts beyond that, from other member institutions, and even from people who are not yet member institutions, at member institutions. And finally, we wanted to be able to balance both being directive. Yes, we know this is important, and we're going to really concentrate our resources here, but also open-ended, realizing that one of the benefits of an open community like IIIF is that a great idea and inspiration and opportunity can come from any corner. Finally, over the last years, especially with the conference, we've really begun to settle into an annual process. And we didn't want to make this a one-time thing where we have to update it again in 5 years. So we'll get to that. Next slide, please. There are, as we themes that came up from the community, from the operating committee and the executive committee, we've really identified 4 pillars is the term that we've settled on, where we really want to concentrate our efforts, or these are broad themes. So the first is advocacy and leadership, and as a vision statement and an empowering statement, we want IIIF to become a global leader in advocating for interoperability in research cultural heritage. So not just a community, not just a technically excellent community, but one that is actually advocating for and advancing interoperability at a global scale. Second is we really want IIIF to ramp up the number of interoperable systems. This is really the key way that people first encounter and derive benefit from IIIF is all of the systems and software, and whether that's hosting content or helping deliver content. The more we have, the better. In terms of community development, we've placed a lot of intention from the very beginning on how IIIF is structured, how it can grow. We want to continue to deliberately expand and evolve and strengthen the IIIF community. And finally, Josh described the IIIFC Consortium, or the IIIF Consortium. This is absolutely essential to the continued success and operation. We want to expand and grow the consortium, both in membership and also in revenue, to allow more things to get done and to expand the reach and level of participation. Next slide, please. For a more pictorial graph on this, we think that all of these are in fact interrelated, and in some cases initiatives don't fit squarely or easily into one, and that is okay. In fact, that's fantastic. But in short, we look at advocacy and leadership as driving the other 3 pillars: technical development, community development, membership, and value. From the very beginning with IIIF, we've seen technical development and community development have co-evolved. So what are the use cases? Who are interested in the use cases? That feeds into technical development. How can we develop specifications, advance the model, and develop software, as well as deploy it into systems? Both the technical development and the community development have really catalyzed the growth of the IIIFC Consortium and of the value that we've seen. And just from sessions over the last 2 to 3 days, we've seen that that innovation continues and continuous opportunity to continue to provide value for our common and overlapping missions. Next slide, please. So for a little bit more detail, so for advocacy and leadership, what we really want to do, and I think this is subtle, but this is fundamentally new for IIIF, is we want to shift from providing excellent solutions to actually becoming advocates and a global presence and voice for interoperability more generally. This is essential because this moves IIIF from being just a technical solution and something that is generally rooted in cultural heritage organizations, or CHOs, to something that is more important and actually speaks to our underlying mission, why all of us are in the fields that we are in the institutions where we're working. This has a number of benefits by increasing visibility and a connection with various audiences. Also about increasing relevance to people who are not in the immediate circle or who have already been converted to IIIF. So that includes funders, potential partners, commercial firms, and standards bodies. Finally, this may, depending on how successful and how broad we go, this might be a potential pathway to reaching end users and researchers directly. So some examples of illustrative potential initiatives, and this is where hopefully you'll be starting to put on your thinking caps. These emerged from the discussions with the operating and executive committees earlier this year. Working with some of the major internet platforms to get IIIF baked in, really moving to 3D interoperability for the entire sector, not for just cultural heritage, and we've seen some good work there already. Continuing to push around audiovisual interoperability, blogs, articles, presentations, thought pieces on the value of interoperability in the information space, and communications or targeted outreach to funders to try to get them to encourage IIIF as a requirement to maximize the impact of their investments. Next slide, please. On overlapping front is technical development. So software, again, is the main vehicle where where the rubber meets the road and people realize value for IIIF. We want to really push the development and the adoption and the incorporation of IIIF into more and more technical solutions. This, I think, is one of those keystone initiatives. If IIIF gets baked into 3 or 4 times more compatible systems, that means we're also going to be doing a fantastic job of technical community support, outreach, and getting aids to software developers. So some ideas here that have come up over the last year to 2 years are that really investing in IIIF Commons. We've seen the 3D technical specification group already. We've got fantastic examples of the MAPS group, which just seems to be nuclear powered and just goes. More cookbook recipes and more advanced cookbook recipes to help translate between the specifications to practical and quality implementations, and better outreach to and documentation for and onboarding of developers. This is something that David Newberry and Tom from the Wellcome Foundation have really stressed, is that there's lots of developers out in the world. Cultural heritage developers are really paying attention to IIIF, but there's a much bigger world. Could we lower the barrier and increase the visibility for that community? Next slide, please. So for community development, this is continued attention to how we're growing. We've spent a lot of time on this. This is in some ways is the least new, but still maintains its presence as one of the most important things. How do we make sure that additional institutions are aware of, adopt, and can help support IIIF? That could be in different sectors, not necessarily cultural heritage. It could, for example, be in STEM or medical, technology, engineering research. That might be extension to new types of formats, new geographies, and new languages. And again, as the community expands, we'll see that natural filtering back into technical development and technical advances. So some of the things in these may seem familiar, but lowering barriers to access for smaller institutions, starter toolkits for non-technical users, better representation to people for whom English is not their first nor any language. There's a real opportunity here that you'll hear more about in terms of annotations and investing in annotations. That's been an initial and fundamental assumption around IIIF, and the scholarly ecosystem and annotation ecosystem, I think, is still waiting to be fully tapped. Moving beyond relevance and understanding beyond the strong technical community that is so core to IIIF, and potentially things like a deeper and deliberate expansion into the museum sector, where Tristan was already doing the good work. Next slide, please. And the last one is we really want to revisit, restructure, and broaden IIIFC and the membership and value proposition that comes with helping support the IIIF Consortium and IIIF overall. So if we could dramatically lower the fees for being a member of IIIF, and at the same time dramatically increase, maybe super dramatically increase the number of participating institutions, we'd see a double effect. One is more revenue and more investment to strengthen the community still further, but also more direct participation from institutions and individuals worldwide. And there have been a ton of potential ways and a ton of potential avenues that we've seen for that. And Josh will be talking about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. In terms of governance and structure for this, the IIIFC Executive Committee will be taking on a really important role in overseeing this strategic planning framework and the initiatives underneath it in the coming years. So ultimately, that will be the governing body that's helping direct and shape the initiatives and making sure that they're properly resourced, both with people's attention and time, and also funding. Within within the executive committee, we're looking at subcommittees that are focused on initiatives. So we have one for each pillar. So advocacy, technology or technical development, community development, and membership and value. And then within each of the pillars, we foresee having a number of individual initiatives, and those might report up to or be most aligned with a single pillar and therefore a single subcommittee. It's quite easy to see that we would also see some initiatives that actually belong or have a relationship to multiple pillars and therefore multiple committees. The reason we're putting this structure in place is this will let us keep the left hand know what the right hand is doing and keep a coherent front as we're pushing forward, so we can really leverage progress across a broad front. And I think the next slide, I will turn it over to Neil to talk about what comes next.
Thanks, Tom. Taking all of that into account, how do we put it into operation? So the IIIF Consortium has an annual planning basis. You can see here Q1 launch goals, new budget year, Q2 annual conference, and the in-person exec committee meeting. Q3 drive works completion, access and update, and then Q4 the roundup of all of the year's activities, preparation for next year's activities, and annual budget approval. So taking into consideration everything that Tom has talked about there, you know, we are looking at a sort of 3 to 5 year horizon to complete this work. So you need a strategy and then annual implementation plans to sort of drive that strategy forward. So that's the pattern that we're thinking of. Next slide, please. So what's next? So following the presentation here, feedback from the community, we'll be looking at launching this in 23. And as Tom outlined, there'll be a working group for each of those pillars listed. There'll be executive committee progress meetings in March, and then presentations and updates at the conference in Naples in June. Next slide, please. And then this is just another view with a bit more detail. So looking forward to 23. And you can see the rhythm and the pattern that we're going for. Next slide, please. And then one of the challenges and the opportunities for a new strategic plan is that you need funding available to help drive that forward. So we, as part of the budget planning for 23, we've allocated budgets to facilitate the strategic planning activities, and we'll consider a lightweight process to deal with that. But the idea being that there will be the seed funding to pump prime each of the pillar activities. And then I think I'm handing over to...
We've orchestrated this perfectly. Roger or Regina, are you... Roger is decloaked. Take it away.
Thank you, Tom and Neil. Regina Stein and I have been talking about the advocacy and leadership pillar and looking at initiatives that we can put into place over the next several months. Josh, do you have control of the slide deck? There we go. Okay. We determined that our primary objectives were to increase visibility and relevance to funders, partners, commercial firms, standards bodies, and potential end users. And so far, we've focused on national standards efforts, thought leadership series, articles, blogs, and symposia, and targeted outreach to adjacent groups, so related groups. This is particularly of interest to the museum community, as Tom mentioned, that we want more deliberate interaction with the museum community. And the executive members on this subcommittee, Emmanuel Bermez, Tom, Neil Fitzgerald, Antoine Isaac, myself, and Regina Steiner-Göttingen.
Glenn, is this one yours?
No, that's I will do it.
Antoine, I'm sorry.
Hi everyone. No worries, Tom. So the next pillar in our series is technical development, where the focus in the coming months is going to be, thank you, Josh, on two things. So again, technical development, we want to support an active software development community. And the two priorities that we've identified for the moment are first, say, general action to support the software community. First, a bit of fact finding. There has been a survey on who is using which tool in the IIIF community, but that's been quite a while ago, and we would like to run a new one in order to see what is being used currently. Of course, that would be the entry point for identifying the key community tools that we could later support and showcase and foster. One of these community tools that we'd like to support is IIIF Commons, which has actually been presented earlier this week. So a series of software utilities that can be used by developers in the IIIF environment. So that's for general support. In terms of outreach to developer, we are thinking of organizing a IIIF technical conference, which would be potentially around the European Tech Conference, which is scheduled for around Q3 next year. And the idea of this technical conference would be to showcase development and to consolidate the building of technical communities. People-wise, for the moment, the executive committee members are Mike Appleby from Yale, myself from Europeana, and Glenn Robson from the IIIF Consortium. But of course, as already said, we are very much looking forward to working with interested members of the community.
I think this one is me. I'm representing the group that's looking at scholarship and community development. Next slide. And as we talked about the best ways to support scholarship and community that aren't being already executed well within the community, one of the areas that came up repeatedly was annotations. Annotations are one of these technologies that's really core to IIIF. It's baked in throughout the model. IIIF is built on top of that model. And they're being used right now by publishers for things like OCR or tagging. We've seen some really interesting work in the MAPS conversation earlier today around what's being done with there. But one of the promises that we always had in that annotation space is that idea that scholars could pull together images from across the space, annotate them, and share those annotations back out. And the question for us is, this has always been part of IIIF from the very, very beginning of the model. this isn't something that we see happening in the community. And so the question that we're interested in asking and trying to help solve is what's needed to unlock that sharing? It's clearly not a technical problem. The specs tell us how to do that. There's cookbooks, there's models, there's examples. The question that we're really at is what is that thing that people want to do that they can't do? And what do we need to do to enable that and to make that something that's sustainable and fundable? There's a really interesting, it's a question because this is that consumer-based thing. We know publishers like the Getty, where I work, have the resources to do this, but the scholars at the Getty don't, even though we're there. And what would unlock that for them? And so one of the things, if we're looking at how best to move this forward, we're interested in making sure that we're not, proposing a technical solution that already exists out there, and the problem is education. I think some of you saw Nikki O'Neill's presentation earlier about the tools that she's been working on for annotations. There's tools out in the digital humanities community that involves annotation. We're really interested in exploring to make sure that it doesn't already exist or there isn't something we could tweak to make this something people could do. We're also really interested in looking both at that scholarly use case. How do art historians, academics, researchers share this kind of material back and forth, as well as pedagogical use cases? How is this used in education? How can this be used for teaching? Is that a clear use case that we have? And so that's our exploration. We don't know what the outcome will be there, but we see a real problem, well, not a problem, we see a real opportunity in the space to use IIIF to enable more interoperability and more use in the practice, as opposed to the publishing. So I'm very interested in this, as are our colleagues my colleague Simeon Warner, Rashmi Singhal at Harvard, Stu Sneidman, and Alan Wolk, also at Harvard. So we're going to be looking into this over the next year, and I'm really interested to hear and see what it goes and to have input.
Thank you, David. Excuse me. And this is back to me to talk a little bit about this fourth pillar, which is, obviously critically connected to all these other pillars, but in some ways is a little bit different and is a little bit more practical or tactical, or however you might want to think about that. But talking about membership and value, and in some ways, this is really just reaching through to sustainability and long-term viability for all the things that we're talking about, implementations around the world, and the community efforts and staffing efforts to support those things. So the core desire, as we explore this as part of this strategic effort, is to lower membership fees overall for the members. So we had a certain structure for kind of the foundational aspect of the IIIF Consortium, and to get that baseline of support going. But we recognize that that highest level of tier is not necessarily easy to support in perpetuity, and so we want to eventually lower membership fees, but in doing that, and this is sort of another core piece of this, we want to create a sustainable and equitable model that allows broader participation. So it sort of makes sense, and it's the way a lot of these things develop. But the IIIF Consortium has been funded by and driven in large ways about the largest institutions, research institutions, national libraries, very large scale organizations. And so we want to be able to bring in, over the years, as we've grown to 63 members, we brought in a lot of other institutions in a lot of different sectors. We want to continue that growth and an ability to bring in smaller institutions and places from many parts of the globe. So that is our core desire to explore. Obviously, we want to do all of that, keeping in mind sustainability, and so that we can continue to fund the staffing efforts and the training efforts and the scholarship efforts that we've already kind of initiated, and grow those as well. So to this point, so far, we've a few of us have gotten together and initiated some conversations around this. We've done some research into peer organization, into membership models that similar kinds of efforts have developed, and done some basic financial and sustainability modeling to look at what the membership base needs to look like in the end. And so for this right now, in our discussion so far, the exec members that we've been bringing along are Regina Stein, Neil Fitzgerald, Simeon Warner, and Kurt DeBelder, as well as myself, kind of helping shepherd this effort so far. But yeah, we're really eager to continue this conversation and have more folks bring in some input about how we can bring new ideas and set up some things to make this more appealing to a huge, bigger and broader membership base in the future. So I think with that covers the pillars. Maybe I'll hand it back to you, Tom, for this last piece.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Are there any, before we break out into groups, and we have 4 groups planned, 1 for each pillar, where we'd invite you to meet with and take part of shaping what the activities will be for 23 and beyond. Are there any questions or discussions on this new framework? Let's see. Julian, I see how does the framework relate to the community and TSG groups? That is a really good question, and we think that there is a one of the next steps, and for the next quarter, will be to basically begin writing up stub initiatives and better descriptions of the pillars, and making sure pillars. Did I say pillars? Pillars, to make sure that there is enough visibility on this. So again, the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and we see a synergy instead of a disintegration. So I think for one of the groups that we've talked a lot about is the outreach group. Outreach is probably going to be integral to, if not all 4, at least 3 of the pillars, and we want to make sure that the work of that group is can amplify what's going on with the in each pillar, with all the initiatives, but also that they are able to make use of the pillars in their own work. I think the same thing will happen with the community groups and with the TSGs. Brian, you decloaked, but I couldn't tell if you were talking or not. No sound came through.
I was, but I didn't have this turned on, so it didn't work. I just want to say I appreciate the focus on annotation. I think especially if you're going to talk about synergy, as I've sort of bounced around in the group, that's the one thing that basically everyone who's using their resources can have, not only to look at other resources, but also to just describe their resources further in a way you expect it to sort of work everywhere. Because I think web annotations really focuses on that. And as you saw from us in particular, trying to use it for georeferencing, we're going to stick a lot of data in there, but the point is you can. And as you come across more complex things, it's just how it's going to have to go. I am a full stack developer, so my main interaction with this has been as a developer. And I will say, watching the APIs change has really, it stuck with sort of how it's been going on the web. It really helped me understand other standards and APIs and stuff. And so I think you're doing a really good job. And I think I would very much focus on annotation. I agree with that.
That's great. Then maybe you know which group you will be in, which breakout group you'll want to join.
Maybe.
Let's see. Any other questions or comments? There's some things in chat. Regina is already mentioning that the cross-pollination has begun with connections with the outreach group. Ben Bacalar is talking about how the design community group is probably a great fit with the community initiatives in particular, and that the personas are already being used. So I think David is right that those will probably be widely applicable, not just within a single pillar. I guess, are there any other questions or comments? I guess I want to just underscore before we go to breakout groups 2 things. First is these are not meant to be finite or narrowly prescriptive. We want to be able to concentrate the benefits of concentration, but without limiting the what an open community can do. So we will be really concentrating on 4 of these key questions. But if you have an additional initiative, or if you have something that you think would benefit from snapping into or augmenting the strategic planning framework, please let us know, because that would be great to do. And the second thing, just to reinforce what Neil mentioned, is that we will be putting our money where our mouth is. In some cases, we don't have overfull coffers, but some of this work might benefit from some spot funding. So if there's something where a little bit of travel or a little bit of contracting work or a little bit of swag would be helpful, please think about how you could shape a request for some part of $50,000 that would help move things forward. I think if we're quite successful in advancing the pillars, and especially the community initiatives, or if there are grants that fit right into this kind of framework, please let us know, and we can use both things to reinforce each other. So with that, why don't, does it make sense to transition to the breakout groups?
Yes, so I believe they should all be set up already, and they follow the, oh, actually, we have a slide. Sorry, let me share this again. So they follow the pillars that we just discussed, but they should be set up in just a minute, and you'll be able to select which group you're interested in joining in, and then we'll be able to lead smaller group discussions. And we'll take it from there. And so we actually we won't be reconvening back here, so we'll break out into these discussion groups and let those small discussions develop as much as they can. We have, this Zoom will stay open basically until the last group is done discussing, but we have scheduled another about 35 minutes or so if folks want to make use of that. So we'll open up the breakout groups rooms now. And if you have questions, please get in touch with us. But otherwise, thank you so much for your participation. This isn't really possible without you, this strategic planning effort, nor anything that the community does. So thanks for joining today, and please help us in the breakout room discussions. Take it from there.